Hi, this is a continuation of the Pajama Shorts or Pajama Pant project for distant learning at Fremont Christian School. We have completed up through step 10. Now, I told you when we finished that video to press your seam open, then I realized that's not what I wanted you to do. So instead, I want you to zigzag. You had your zigzag your seam, do that finishing stitch along this edge so that when we wear them and wash them, we won't have a lot of threads there. So then I went to the iron and I pressed my seam to the back of my shorts. They wanted to lay best that way. I pressed them over to the back side of my shorts and pressed the pocket going forward to the front, because that's where you'll need it to be to put your hands in your pockets. And then I did that finishing stitch down the edge here, just as we did around the edge of the pocket. So now we are ready to go to step 11. In step 11, I am going to match. I have a front and a back that we've just finished. I am going to match this inside seam, the inside leg seam. You will see, or should see, that you're going to have, once you sew this, you're going to have a complete leg of half of your shorts, okay? You're going to have a complete leg. Now, they're not going to match because the sizes of the front and the back are different. To accommodate our back side is bigger, so the back of our shorts are bigger. And so, but we can still match this seam, this inner leg seam. So I'm going to match that and I'm going to pin that now. Always matching my raw edges as best I can. Sometimes I like to match the ends first, the top and the bottom, so then I can kind of work towards the middle and know that my seams will be matched at the top and the bottom, unless I cut wrong. In the last step, when I was doing the second leg, I had a little problem where I felt like one leg, it looked like one side was going to be about a ½ inch longer than the other, and I found that I had not laid the pocket flat enough when those four seams came together. So I found my mistake, and then when I repinned it the second time, it was correct. Now, I should have done it this way because this is the bottom of my shorts, and my pin should be in the other way. Because, remember my grandma's secret, your garment will hang better and look better when it's finished if you start from the bottom of the garment and sew towards the top. So that's what we're going to do right now with both legs. Okay, bring this towards me. Again, I want a 1/4 inch seam. I just about sewed 5/8 because that's a hard habit for me to break, but this pattern calls for 1/4 inch seams. So I have my needle in the fabric, my presser foot's down, I take out the first pin, and tie in. The last thing I did was overcast. So again, I have to set my stitch back to my straight stitch. Okay, now I'm ready to tie that knot, and I'm ready to sew this seam. Pulling out the pins as I go. Some people like to sew over their pins, and if you're lucky, it will go over your pins and you won't break a needle. But that is just not really the best practice. Needles are expensive, you don't want to break them. And you certainly, especially with a computerized machine, you don't want to run the risk of messing up the computer, jamming up your machine. So we'll do this the right way here. Okay, I can cut my thread, trim those up. Remember, we cut our threads as we go. Otherwise, my shorts would be done and I'd have these long threads hanging from them. So I'm going to cut my threads as I go. Again, I'm not just throwing them on the floor. I have a handy dandy little, at home you can use a mug to put your threads in, okay? Trying to keep my sewing area here pretty clean. So I've done this inner leg seam, and now I have a complete circle. That's one leg of my shorts. Now before I move on to the next leg, I am going to go ahead and finish this edge with that zigzag stitch that you've been using so far. Putting my presser foot down, needle in the fabric. You are going to be so pleased with all of these thread seams overcast. It will look so much better on the inside. It'll wash better and wear better. My grandma firmly believed that if you were a great seamstress, you should be able to wear your clothes wrong side out and they would still look nice. Now, of course, it's not going to look as pretty, but she's right. If they're sewn well, you could wear them wrong side out and not look like a complete bum. Okay, so I finished that stitch. I'm going to do the same on my other leg. So I have the other leg front and back. Going to bring right sides together, put the pretty pieces together. I'm going to match my raw edges. Matching raw edges, I'm going to put one pin at the top, one pin at the bottom, and then fill in the pins in between. Again, matching those raw edges. Now I can see I didn't cut completely straight there, so I have to make a decision about which way to go. So I can just really see it. I don't know what I was thinking with my scissors. I must have been in too much of a hurry. You can see that piece that's going to stick up. I can cut that off later, but I want to sew it first. So into the machine I go. Again, the last thing I did was the overcast with the zigzag stitch, so I got to adjust back to my straight stitch. Press your foot down, needle down, ready to sew. Again, I went from the bottom to the top. Tied a knot, cutting my threads. I'm going to ask you, what do I do next? I overcast. Okay, change my stitch. Now I'm going to even this out just a little bit since I did a poor job of cutting right there. Press the foot down and I'm needle down, I'm ready to go. Okay, just because I like to press as I go, I think that's another secret to your garment looking the nicest, is I'm just going to go to the iron and I'm going to press this seam one way or the other by slipping this big opening over the end of the iron. I don't know whether you can see the end of my iron here. Right there. And I'm going to press that seam one way or the other. It doesn't matter. I do want to be careful that I'm not stretching this seam that has not yet been sewn. Flannel, as with many fabrics, will stretch. And once the seam's all stretched out, nothing's going to match. It's not going to hang correctly. My iron cooled off a little bit, so. Okay, ready to go on to step number 12. As I was standing there pressing, I was thinking, remembering my grandma. She passed away when I was in high school, so it's been a long time, but she loved to sew. And really, in particular, she loved to make her own clothing. And she would go to town and she would try on things that she liked. And then she would write down what she liked. And she would go to the fabric store and she would pick out a pattern that she thought most resembled what she tried on in the store. And she would mix patterns together too. It didn't have to be just one pattern. She was good. And she would pick out the fabric that she liked. And she would go home and she'd make this dress or pants and top similar to what she tried on in town. I would venture to say everything of her dress clothing was in her closet. She had made herself. I'm sure everyday things like jeans and t-shirts she purchased, but I mean, anything she wore to church or to dress up was something she'd made herself. And I love being her granddaughter because every year not just at my birthday, but I knew that at my birthday I wouldn't get one new dress. I'd usually get about 4 that she had made out of one pattern. She just changed it up a little bit, different fabric. And I was probably the best dressed kid at my school because Grandma made all my clothes, so that was pretty exciting. So I'm going to turn step number 11. Or 12, turn one leg right side out. So I'm going to, again, be careful not to stretch the fabric. I'm going to turn this leg right side out. Okay. Now, place this leg, and I'm going to hold it from the hand. I put my arm through it. I'm going to hold it at the hem, at the bottom, and I'm going to place it inside this other leg. This is really much easier with shorts. Those of you that are making pants, you've already noticed that every seam's longer and every step is just because you're working with more fabric. That's all right. Okay, so we're now working on the seam that goes between the legs. It's referred to in the pattern directions as the crotch seam. And that seam is really important because you don't want it ripping out, and it gets the most stress when you're wearing the pants or the shorts. So I've put one leg inside each other. I have my right sides together now. I'm going to go right to my seam, and I am going to put a pin there, trying as best as I can to match those seams. So that they look like one seam. It was almost like I sewed this leg and then went straight over and sewed the other leg. So I'm going to try that. Then, again, very careful not to stretch out my fabric. I am going to pin, matching my raw edges, starting at the waist, starting at the top of the shorts or pants, and coming down and matching those seams. I hope that you'll consider making another pair. Um, you know, you can even buy your own pattern. I'll share with you the number. This pattern is quite expensive. I don't know, patterns used to be inexpensive, but nothing's inexpensive anymore. And but that's why we traced it for you, so that you didn't have to buy a $16.95 pattern. You all shared a $16.95 pattern, but you would want, you know, if you want to make other sizes, they come in multiple sizes, and you could trace it like I did. They sell that paper also that we use to trace the patterns on. They sell that at the fabric store. And if it's a pattern, a multi-size pattern that you might want to make in multiple different sizes for different family members, or maybe you get smaller or larger, you'll have the pattern to do that. But you may keep the pattern I've given you if you think you'll make yourself another pair. If you're absolutely certain that you will never use it, please treat it well and put it in your bag to return to the school. It will save me a lot of tracing time for the next class, even though I hope the next class will be here with me. Okay. I have this pinned. Stitch from the front waist. They tell us which direction they want us to go. How do I know what the front is? Well, another of Grandma's tips would have been to tell you that when you took that pattern piece off the front of your shorts, would have been to put a pin. I like to keep pins in the front of something so I can easily, oh yeah, there's a pin, that's the front. So I would have pinned them like this, but since I didn't have you do that, I know it's the front of the shorts because it's not quite as deep of a curve as the back of the shorts. So this is my front right here. That's not a very deep curve. So I'm going to start here and then sew to the other side, again at 1/4 inch. I overcast last. I have to change my stitch back to my straight stitch. Here we go. I forgot to tie a knot, so I'm going to back stitch, come forward again. So my seam allowance is still 1/4 of an inch. Keep this hand up here guiding, this hand guiding from here, but don't pull and don't put pressure on it. You do not want to stretch the seam out. You're guiding it. You're not helping it go through the foot, you're just guiding it, keeping it on that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm getting to a curve, so notice I slowed down. I'm not going to gun the gas pedal. I'm at the inside leg seam and my seam allowance wants to flip over, so I just lifted the presser foot and tucked it back under the direction that I had pressed it. Now I'm to those notches that I matched by clipping in. I'm going to have to take a little deeper seam there because I wasn't careful enough when I clipped that, and I clipped it a little deeper than a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to go a little wider there, and you can also cut around a notch if this is my pattern and you're cutting. You could actually, I'm cutting down the edge, I'm to a notch. I can also, this is the way I guess I always did it my whole life, was cutting a notch like that, and then you match those notches. So that was a new technique to me when I learned about the slits. I like those, but I don't know that I like it on this project because our seam allowances are not very wide. See how I had to make a wider seam there? Look at how deep my little notch was. Okay, now sometimes I like to go over this seam between the legs again so that it won't rip out. But these are pajamas and not pants that I'm wearing out in public, so I'll skip that step today for the sake of time, but if you want to, you can go over that seam again. And if you do go over that seam, you only really need to do it in this highly stressed part right in here. And you want to sew right on top of your old stitches, okay? But I am going to overcast this stitch as I've done with all of our seams so far in this project. So I'm going to change that to my overcast stitch. In an overcast stitch, you do want, when the needle's on the right side, you want it to be going off the fabric. That's what's creating the overcast that's going to prevent it from fraying as you wash or wear it. It's a long ways around here. Always when you're sewing, make sure around the machine area where your needle's going that you're keeping your project or your garment pretty flat so that you're not sewing into something that you don't want to sew through. Okay, I have sewn that seam together. I've overcast it. I am going to go to the iron and just down so far, maybe 4 inches, 5 inches, I'm going to press that seam open. It doesn't really have to be pressed open where it's going to be between your legs because it doesn't need to lay flat there. It's going to stand up because you're standing up in them anyway, so it's fine. But I do want to press it open there. Again, careful not to stretch it out. Okay, I'm ready to turn this right side out. Okay, I have shorts. Okay. Now, I know that this is the front for 2 reasons. I have my pins that, like my grandmother used to mark her pattern, and I have that finished edge on my pocket. My hand will go on the pocket here. So this is step 11 and 12. And we will be back in a few moments for the next step.